and we are now live and recording. So let's start off with introductions. Folks, my name is Amar Sheth. I'm the handsome fellow on the right-hand side of the screen. I run customer success at our company, Sales for Life, and very simply, we're the global authority on this topic of social selling, which I'm sure a lot of you kind of know about, probably why some of you are here, and I'm super excited to welcome this esteemed panel today. So, I'm going to kick it off, and I'll have everyone do their own introductions. Jill Rowley, let's start with you.
Thanks, Amar. I'm really excited to be here as well. I am joining from Austin, Texas, where I am speaking at and attending Forrester's B2B Marketing and Sales Enablement Conference. Quite some interesting data and research that has been shared already this morning on the changing buyer, the B2B buyer. I am a sales professional trapped in a marketer's body. The reality is the lines between sales and marketing are blurring and the roles are blending. I've spent my entire career basically in software sales and in tech. And now I work with both startups and enterprises on their digital sales transformations. I couldn't be more excited to be here on the conversation with two real practitioners driving real change and transformation, Kevin and Christian, in their respective organizations. Thanks for the invite.
Thanks, Jill. Kevin, how about you?
Thank you, Amar, and good morning and good afternoon to all. And thank you for the invite and allowing me the opportunity, along with my colleagues here, to speak today. As Amar mentioned, Kevin Casey, and I lead the sales enablement and training for Thomson Reuters Enterprise. And so within this role, really responsible for looking at and engaging our sales organizations across the globe in the best practices and enterprise approach, so we have a more comprehensive and, more importantly, consistent approach to how we go to market and how we develop our sales organizations. So prior to this role, I led a few of the different sales training organizations within Thomson Reuters and came into the business as a field sales rep in our large law division. So thank you again, Amar.
Thanks, Kevin. Christian, I'll hand it over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Amar. And hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and hopefully good evening. I hope there are also attendees from Europe on the call or on the webinar. My name is Christian Owando. I'm Director of Inside Sales at Juniper Networks, responsible for the EMEA organization here based in Amsterdam in beautiful Holland. We have a team of about 30 people being responsible for the EMEA market, and I'm extremely excited to be here and share some of my experiences also today.
Thanks, Christian. Really appreciate it. Folks, you're in for a real treat, right? Jill Rowley has very much contributed to how the social selling space has evolved over the course of the last 5 years. Her ideas, her strategies, her frameworks, her thinking has literally powered hundreds of companies worldwide. So we selected her as a voice that can really help a lot of you today. If you're in a leadership capacity, I implore you, listen to Jill. Kevin and Christian, what can I say about them? They're just in their respective fields at the top, and both are literally just incredible examples from enablement to actual sales practitioner at a management level. They'll be able to share a lot of insights from their companies, from their experience with collaborating with others in the market. So here's my ask of you. Let's not make this a static webinar, right? As you can already tell by the tone, we're pretty casual around here. We really invite you to send in your questions. Again, use the question box on the GoToWebinar control panel. Get your questions in, I'll moderate, I'll field, and we'll get the experts here to answer, okay? So with that being said, here's the quick agenda. We'll spend 10 seconds here. We've done the intros, we'll rock and roll. And really, this is about, the competition, how we can differentiate from it, especially in the enterprise concept. At the end, we're going to have plenty of time for Q&A and perspectives as well, right? So share your perspectives during that time also. Okay, so let's rock and roll. I want to get into the first topic, and basically it's all around the evolving customer. I think we all know that the customer has changed. I don't think anyone needs to be reminded of that. But I want to know how they've changed. And specifically, how can enterprise sales, or how has enterprise sales been affected by this, and what have you done in your company? The data point here to look at, according to Gartner here, is that by 2020, customers are going to manage 85% of their interaction with the enterprise without a human. Now, that's scary. I'm not sure, quite frankly, if that's remotely going to happen. But clearly, all of us do know that there is a massive movement towards automation. So, Jill, I'll start with you. What are your perspectives on the evolving customer, especially as it pertains to this kind of Gartner stat?
Yeah, I actually think it's very true. I think that humans oftentimes bring friction into the buying process. And it could be me signing up for my new electricity provider when I moved from San Francisco to Charleston, South Carolina. I was giddy when I could do all of that online and not have to actually speak with a human, in particular being restricted to 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Monday to Friday. Also, when we moved to Charleston, South Carolina, we didn't bring any vehicles. We sold our cars, and I needed to buy 2 new vehicles. I didn't go to a dealership, a traditional dealership. I actually went online to CarMax, and I was able to see what their inventory was, narrowed it down to the manufacturers, the different vehicles that I was interested in. I was able to look at pictures of the specific vehicles and look at the stats, and essentially go to the lot and feel and touch the actual vehicle and make the purchase without any haggling or price negotiation. So there's a lot of blurring and blending, work and personal, marketing and sales, and also what I do as a mom and a wife versus what I do as a B2B sales and marketing professional. They're really melding, and a lot of it is the devices that we use the same device for personal and professional, and increasingly more we as buyers want friction removed from our purchasing processes, and we don't want to be haggled or harassed or so yeah, I totally see this, and I see it happening in enterprise sales as well.
That's awesome. Thanks, Jill. Kevin, how about you? How is Thomson Reuters kind of getting ready for this potential reality that's coming down the pipe? What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so a few things, but just to echo Jill's comments, I think we have to look no further than the B2C experience being brought into the B2B work environment. And that's clearly the trend, and has been the trend, and that's been magnified by the services we receive from our insurance company or our banking services or Amazon. It's impacted the way that we do business. And for us Gen Xers, it's a way we've adapted to learn. For the Millennials and then the Gen Z to follow the Millennials, that's the way they grew up. That's a clear expectation. But in addition to that, businesses have less time for vendors, whether it's too much of a workload, whether it's the ability to educate themselves, find out the information online. That old CEB, it's not that old, but the CEB statistic that buyers are 57% of the way through the journey before they even engage with an organization. It's a telling fact. And the CEB redid that study just this year. And it was kind of good news, bad news. The good news is that still roughly 57% of their journey is undertaken before they meet with a sales rep. The bad news is they haven't regressed, right? They haven't in the past 5 years said, we made an uneducated decision. We need to find out more from that sales rep. So again, it's a very telling statistic. And in addition to that, less budget, It's any number of things, but what we've narrowed it down in terms of what we need to do moving forward is looking at, we have a better educated customer. And for those of you maybe not familiar with Thomson Reuters, we sell into the legal, the financial, and the tax and accounting marketplace. So our customers are CPAs, financial professionals, and attorneys. And you talk about a group that likes to study, likes to research, and can make decisions. That's your trifecta right there. So we really have to continually turn around and take a look externally. What are we doing to address this? And then you factor in, of course, the millennials now being more of the decision makers and influencers. It's continually changing. But I guess to summarize quickly, Amar, we have to be able to give more of that B2C experience, so access to content, information, decisions, and we have to really figure out how we effectively engage the customers, because the days of golf and the days of going to a baseball game at night or even an hour lunch are kind of fading.
Yeah, Kevin, you made some really, really powerful points there. I want to latch on to one of them. And then, Christian, let me ask you this question from a point Kevin made, which is this content, information, decision model. What are you folks doing at Juniper that kind of utilizes that thinking? And most importantly, have you had any success using content, information, leading to an ultimately positive decision in your favor? Can you talk to us a little bit about that, and maybe through that story, the concept of the evolving customer will be there?
Sure, Amar. So I guess one of the biggest change when I think of the behavior of buyers is certainly, or at least with many of the buyers, is that they make up their mind already before they engage with a vendor. So most of the customers, they already know pretty much what they want to buy. Maybe not from you, maybe from someone else, but they have a pretty clear idea about how the end solution should look like. And the reason is most of the buyers, they view a significant amount of relevant content from the chosen vendor already in a very early stage of a sales process. Buyers, they have nowadays access to multiple channels and content, right? Everyone can read white papers of a company or case studies, or they can follow webinars, they can read blogs and so on. So there are tons of information out there. And because of all these changes, I believe enterprises, they have to adjust to it. They have to in a way adopt these approaches. And of course, it's easier said than done, because in the end of the day, it's a matter of having the right mindset and also skill set. And I believe it's coming very much around about surrounding your customers from different angles, making sure that you feed your customer with relevant information very early in the sales cycle, and make sure that you help the customer to overcome certain challenges maybe they see by just feeding them with content, or be an eye-opener to your customers very early, because then you can really influence their decision. And once they got all this information and they pretty much made up their mind already, then you start really engaging with them. So this is something what we try to adopt, and what we try to do day in, day out with our sales guys. And we saw a lot of success already, lots of success stories, different projects we successfully closed also. And just to give an example, we had a big project, a very exciting project last year in UK with one of my sales guys, and it exactly started this way. The sales guy in my team, he started to target one of the customers in a very early stage of the sales cycle, and he understood by really qualifying the customer what potential needs and issues could be, and he started to feed the customer with information and influenced in the end of the day the customer's decision. So that's certainly a way which is successful, and that's something we try to do every day with our sales guys.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Christian. I appreciate that. So folks, we'll leave this question for now. I wanted to basically kick off with just an overall 30,000-foot view of how the market has changed. And I'm going to borrow a line from Jill Rowley, which I think she's famously kind of used and kind of really sharpened up, which is, the customer has changed more in the last 10 years than they have in the last 100. And I think that was the intent of that entire first part of the discussion. Now, if the customer has changed, let's explore some other key changes and shifts that are already happening. It's not impending, it's actually already underway. So I want to start talking about the big M factor, right? The millennial factor and the rise of the millennials, right? And there's a lot of organizations, but Forrester specifically has said that by 2025, so that's actually not that far away, in less than 8 years or so, millennials will form the largest age demographic group of the entire US workforce. I'm guessing throughout Western nations, this is largely going to be the case as well. It certainly will be the case in Canada, where I'm based. Christian, you can talk about Holland as well, right? But ultimately, if you look at most modern societies today, millennials are just, millennials and also Generation Z, as Kevin said, the generation after millennials, they're just going to have these certain expectations. So what are you folks doing? Kevin, I'd love to start with you. What are you folks concentrated on, or where do you think it should be going in terms of how to engage this new modern buyer that is the millennial?
Yeah, thanks, Amar. And I like how you position this as engaging the millennial buyer. Too many businesses and too much research I've been seeing is still about defining who the millennials are. If as a business or as a hiring manager or as a sales professional, you don't have that figured out at this point, that ship has sailed. We need to be on to that Gen Z, because following this statistic here, in addition, the Gen Z will make up about 20% of the workforce at that point. And just to kind of clarify that, I was with a group of 10 of our sales managers just 2 weeks ago for our Sales Manager Academy. And as the opening exercise, we just whiteboarded, and I asked a simple question: what do we know about millennials? And we went through 4 pages of material before I just said, okay, we get it, right? This makes sense. And I said, conversely, the people you'll be hiring very shortly, Gen Z, what do we know about them? And they had 4 comments. So it kind of leads to, we've defined this group. It's always going to evolve. It's always going to change as they mature. But this is the group that really challenged the status quo. And in terms of our sales managers, the ones that have been going through our academy for the past 18 months to 2 years, they are a different persona than the traditional sales managers we've hired. They like to learn. They like to learn in a different way. The online components do not scare them. So how we address the millennial buyers is very similar to how we're addressing them internally now, which is challenge our status quo in terms of the way we've traditionally sold. Don't look for that hour appointment where you travel to San Francisco to sit down to have a meet and greet. We need to respect the time. That's a big, big factor with millennials, right? That their work quality versus life quality. And so if we use a traditional sales model, that is not going to work as effectively within this group. So one is, we really need to reflect on how we're developing our people in response to how the millennial generation wants to buy. And within, again, the legal community, the tax community, and the financial community, that's the core targeted buying persona we're facing right now.
Yeah, Kevin, great point. There's a brilliant comment here from Doug Clark, and I'm just going to read it out loud for the audience. So Doug adds and chimes in with his perspective, saying, in the finance space, the whole area is shifting. And Doug, I'm paraphrasing what you're saying here, but Doug gives examples of consumer lending. He says consumer lending is undergoing tremendous transformation, i.e. crowdsourcing of funding is already happening, 2-hour turnarounds on loans, etc. And the whole tradition of coming into a branch, or Kevin, as you said, flying from a meeting to the Bay Area, just to review paperwork or ideas, etc. This is all going away, while we speak.
to Doug's point, by the time it takes you to fly to San Francisco, that deal is going to be already secured by your competition, right? with all the electronic and the ability to work online.
Yeah, and this is a great question coming in from Roland. And Christian, I'm going to turn to you. Perhaps you can kind of address this portion of Roland's question while also with the main question on screen here, which is Roland asks, millennials are challenging the status quo, which is great because that is our biggest competitor. Status quo, he means. So he's asking, what is required to let their voice really influence the overall buying decision? So Christian, can you talk to us about that? Are you facing millennial buyers or millennial champions in the accounts in which you're targeting? And then what have you and your sales team done to effectively address that?
Yeah, absolutely. So for the ones who are maybe not familiar with Juniper Networks, so Juniper Networks is in the IT and a big IT player. So we deal a lot with millennials day in, day out. And to your question, I believe it comes very much down to actually speaking their language, right? And also leveraging a set of different communication channels or communication tools when we engage with the millennials. And when you think about millennials, most of them at least, they grew up in an electronics field and increasingly online and socially network world. Millennials, they're equipped with a whole range of different electronic devices or assets. They walk around with tablets and laptops and phones and watches and so on. And they have direct access to basically unlimited information. And I believe that's key here. We need to speak the language, and we need to make basically the same what they are doing. We need to be present. We need to be visible out there. They need to be able to find us. I talked earlier in this webinar about sharing relevant information, for example, with our customers, with many of them who are millennials. So they are searching for this relevant information about your product, your company, your solution, and so on. So make sure that it is accessible. People can find you. And it also comes down to how you communicate with the millennials, right? It's not so much about meeting your customer for a lunch and talk about the project. They want to be able to communicate in different ways. They want to use maybe email or phone, or use video, or use invite your customer to a webinar. These kind of things. It's a whole range of different communication tools, and I believe when you're able to utilize these tools in an effective way and speaking their language, you can be very successful when you deal with the millennials. That's my experience so far from my daily work.
Yeah, Christian, really great insights, and I fully agree with you. Jill, I'm going to go to you next, but I want you to take on a question from the audience here. I've picked a question here from Cameron, which is really sharp. And Cameron asks, what percentage of this emerging workforce do we think will be in positions of responsibility to make enterprise class purchase decisions? Jill, what are your thoughts on that?
So there's making the purchase decision, and then there's influencing the purchase decision. And we know that millennials are absolutely influencing the purchase decision. And in fact, they're largely responsible for that information gathering at that early stage of the discovery process. And they're very digitally native. So if you can't be found digitally and even socially, you will not even be in the consideration by the millennials. We are seeing them age and move into management positions where they do have more purchase making authority. And if you look at, a lot of times the cost of a purchase is decreasing because you're not making a massive upfront investment in like a system. I was actually on the call this morning with an an SVP of corporate strategy at a multi-billion-dollar company who sells point-of-sale systems. And he was talking about one of their small business customers, and she owns a bagel shop, and the owner wants to focus on making bagels and sandwiches. She doesn't want to focus on her point-of-sale system. She doesn't want to have an IT hat that she wears in the business or outsource that, or she also doesn't want to spend $35,000 up front to acquire that system. And that $35,000 that she saved by going with a cloud-based solution and a subscription service, she put into her shop of getting better seating, more comfortable seating that people would stay longer, and more opportunities for her customers to actually interact and engage with each other. So they might not all be in decision-making positions, but they're certainly in the influence seat increasingly.
Yeah, Jill, that's a great point. And Cameron and gang, I'd add the following just from my perspective. If you look at the workforce today, at least in the United States and most Western countries, people are switching jobs every 24 to 36 months. So that's one big trend to keep in mind. The other big trend to keep in mind is the following: that work-life balance are integrating more than ever before. It's very hard to not do emails in the evening and then go pick up your kids in the middle of the day, and like the whole concept of 9 to 5 is kind of blurring. So why does this all matter? It's because the millennial buyers are crafting the workforce around a life-work balance, not a work-life balance. And the way this is affecting buying decisions is that they are rapidly learning skills faster than the generation 30 years ago. So whereas 30 years ago, it might have taken a person, 15 years of commitment to make a director position in a business, that's just not the case anymore. People are making director level positions and salaries in about 5 years now, and they're switching to get ample experience to achieve that. So keep that in mind also. And then, of course, to what Jill said, I couldn't agree more. I've seen this in my own life with our own customers, two of which are here. And it's quite obvious that millennials are absolutely influencing decisions. So yeah, they might not be cutting the check, but they're calling the shots. That's the best way to look at it. All right, we're going to fast forward. I want to kind of logically move the conversation to this stage. And mainly because some of the points that Christian and Kevin had made previously, that, with enterprise class solutions, these are long sales cycles, right? So what are we doing as sales teams today to engage these buyers? Because the data from Serious Decisions says that sales cycles today are 22% longer than they were even 5 years ago. So all these trends are moving up and to the right on a chart. But I guess the question is, what are we doing to address this? Kevin, I'd love to start with you.
Yeah, thanks, Amar. Definitely an issue facing the majority of businesses. And it's interesting in our markets, as 95% of our customer population uses a solution, either ours or a competitor. So there's no real new sales unless a new hedge fund pops up or a new law firm pops up. But even in that case, the professionals have used our products and services. So this really, has been something we've looked into, and the first step that we took is identifying why they're longer. And what we've, found is that there's tighter budgets. In the past, a law firm may use multiple providers of information services. That's no longer the case. The status quo, right? So if they're already using our solution or a competitor's solution, the cost of change is greater than maybe the value that they see. So it's easier just not to make that decision. Increased number of influencers. So not necessarily decision makers, but the people that are putting input into this. If somebody's going to sign the check with their name and have their name associated with that decision, they want to make darn sure that they're making the right decision and that IT supports it, the users support it, that senior management supports it. Whereas maybe 15, 20 years ago, you can make a decision for a few $1 million and the consequences really weren't there. that doesn't happen today in our budgets. And then the aforementioned larger buying committees, right? There's just more people involved in actually getting to that yes. So quickly, a couple things that we've done is we've designed a customer buy cycle, which is the steps required for a customer to make a decision. So below those steps are all the different pieces of input a customer would be required and what they need to know, what they need to sign off on, so that as our sales team goes through the process, they can check the boxes and say, yes, we've done this, yes, we've done that, yes, we've done that, or no, we haven't done that. And that has a lot of advantages to it, right? It helps in our forecasting, because as we know, salespeople for 3 weeks out of the month are the most optimistic people on the face of the earth. Week number 4, when it's closing time, they're not as optimistic, right? And that's when the forecast begins to crumble. So what we put in there are stage gates. So in order to get from one stage to the next, a customer has had to sign off, either verbally or email, that yes, they agree that all these steps have been taken and that they've agreed to move to the next piece. So that's one of them. And then the second is around the strategic account planning. We're focusing more and more and more on that, specifically about the relationship map, right? We have on average 2 or 3 primary contacts within a firm, within an organization. With the turnover, your previous stat, Amar, spot on, right? People leave jobs, get promoted, move on, whatever they do. And that takes away over half of our contacts in our organization. For those of you that have major accounts, an interesting exercise is a relationship map. How far are your contacts from the actual decision makers? It's eye-opening.
Yeah, great insights, Kevin. And I totally agree on the relationship map. Hopefully, we're not going to do that in Q4, right? Hopefully that work is done in advance. Christian, I want to bounce over to you. What are your thoughts on longer sales cycle, and what can we do today to help move it along or kind of support it so buyers feel that we've got their best interest?
Yeah, I can absolutely echo and confirm that the sales cycles become longer and more complex, at least in the IT industry. And I believe one of the main reasons is certainly also the change in the complexity of enterprise solutions, right? Why we maybe 5 years ago we were talking about a firewall to a customer. Nowadays we are talking about complex security solutions, SDSN solutions, and so on. Or maybe 5 years ago, we were talking about a single switch to a customer, and nowadays we talk about a complex data center solution. So the ultimate question is really, how can we handhold and accompany the customer through the lengthy journey, right? And I believe that staying close to the customer is absolutely key, and you have to make sure that the customer in a way feels your love. It doesn't mean that you have to call or contact the customer every other week and ask about how they're doing, how they're progressing, how the weather is, and so on. That's counterproductive, and no customer likes that, right? But what you have to do is you have to make sure that you stay close to the customer and you reach out to customer or you engage with the customer whenever you have something relevant to share. Maybe you have updated information about one of the products or solutions they're considering for their initial project, right? Or one of the system engineers in your company organizes a webinar about a certain topic, a certain product, which might be interesting for the company, for the customer. So it's about adding important, relevant information to the customers and share it with them. It's about making sure you provide them content to navigate actually each stage of the buying process. That's, in my opinion, is absolutely key. And when you master this challenge, then you can also succeed those lengthy sales projects, which are often more than 12 months.
Jill, what are your thoughts? I think Christian really added some great info there. What have you seen from the companies you're kind of talking to right now?
Yeah, so I would say that buying has actually gotten a lot harder And even though the buyer does have more access, nearly unlimited access to information and to people like themselves that they can find in social networks, they're also inundated and overwhelmed. And that to really start to capture someone's attention and start to initiate and build a relationship, it's important that you make a deposit before trying to make a withdrawal. And in selling, it's almost always the seller tries to start the relationship with a withdrawal. 20 minutes of my time is a withdrawal. And if you haven't made a single deposit, given me something of value or something that's interesting or unique, then it's very hard for me to justify allocating those 20 minutes. I think too, we're sort of glossing over text emails, and video is becoming an incredible channel. Actually, we all commented on this webinar that we were disappointed we weren't using our cameras, because we all believe that facial connection. And I was on a call earlier today, and my customer set it up and sent out his conference information, and he just sent a phone line, and he was introducing me to someone on his marketing team. And I told her, I'm like, I'm on your LinkedIn page because I'm looking at your face, like I'm staring into your eyes, and I want to have this conversation with you. And I find it interesting that you not only are passionate about fashion, but also weightlifting. That is something that she shared about herself in a social network that, as I'm in a phone conversation with her, I mention, and she giggles, right? Because that is kind of an odd combination. But, with all the automation and all the tools and all this, it still comes back to human connection, and the routes to getting someone's attention are different. And salespeople, not only salespeople, but sales managers, because you can't have 2.0 sales reps reporting to 1.0 sales managers. Everybody needs new mindset of this empowered buyer who is allergic to being sold, and new skills to really sell a different way and in different channels. There's a lot of investment that needs to be made by sales organizations to be able to be relevant to this modern digitally driven buyer.
Yeah, great points, Joe. I love when you talk about just making the deposits, because I think ultimately, if we're not as salespeople doing that today, how do we stand out? And Doug Clark, who's on the call with us listening, has made some brilliant comments around that. Doug, I'm going to save your comments till the end, because I think there's a right context to introduce them to the audience. So hang tight, Doug. I am going to get to that. And perhaps let's use that as a segue. And I'm basically going to go directly to Christian on this. Let's talk about customer intelligence, Christian. Like, we all know we need customer intelligence, right? But where do you find this intelligence to enable the relevant conversations? What are your thoughts?
Great question, Amar. I guess the answer is the internet, right? If you want to add value to a conversation with your customer, you have to know as much as possible about them. And since we talked about it a lot in this webinar, many of our customers, they are millennials, right? So they are consequently connected to the outside world. They are communicating with the outside world. They are sharing a lot of valuable information. And when you know how to search specifically for those hidden information to understand your customers, I believe you can add real value to a conversation. And you can follow your customers in different ways, right? You can follow them on Twitter or even Facebook, or you set Google alerts, or you follow them as a lead in LinkedIn, and you are all the time up to date about recent changes, developments, news, and so on about the customer. And I can promise you, I can ensure you, when you engage with your customers and when you share these hidden information in a way with your customers, they usually value it very much. So the important message, I guess, here is as soon as your customer feels that you can really add value to them by understanding their needs and possible challenges, you can have a very good chance to have a good and meaningful and relevant conversation with the customer.
Hey, Kevin, what's your thoughts on this? Is what Christian talking about only pertinent to the EMEA market? Are you seeing relevant trends here in North America? What's happening? Are social tools being used in the right way by sales today, you feel?
I don't think consistently enough, but he's spot on, right? But I don't think the social aspect is used, again, consistently enough. And that's a real challenge for a number of reasons, because we can sell to customers only based on what we know of their business to gain their attention. And some of you may know Jim Dickey, who is the principal from Chief Sales Officer Insights, CSO Insights. We had him in to talk to our leadership team just a couple of weeks ago, and he's presenting at Dreamforce in a couple of weeks. So if you're going, I'll just put a plug in for Jim. Great stuff. But here's a telling statistics, Amar. 5% of relevant customer data is captured during a conversation or interaction with a customer. So that data could be email, it could be from their website, it could be from a customer conversation or a phone call. Only 5% of that relevant information is captured by the salesperson. In turn, only 5% of that is put into our CRM. So that's a concern. It's a huge concern. So what we've been working towards is a closer partnership and alignment with both strategy and marketing, so that we're getting the right insights at the right time in order to have those better conversations based on what we know about our customers. The sales rep that's been in a business for 25 years, they have a ton of that knowledge. Unfortunately, a ton of that knowledge is in their head. So what we've really been pushing is enhanced capabilities around capturing data and putting that into our CRM so we have that relevant data, and then sharing that across our enterprise.
Wow, that's amazing. So, I mean, folks, if you're listening to Christian's answers, super tactical from the field. Kevin's answer is all enablement driven. Jill, how do you kind of marry these two positions, and how do we just continue to get insights and intelligence from customers today? What are your thoughts on this? How would you suggest it?
Yeah, it really comes down to research and learning some modern research tactics and tools to help automate that manual process. I mean, I will admit that a lot of the research that I do is still highly manual. And, I was preparing for just an email to the head of sales at Unisys. And I went onto his LinkedIn profile and learned what I could, but then I went and did a Google search, Unisys, his name, video, and I found a 20-some minute main stage keynote presentation he delivered at their customer event. And I watched that video and wrote down his 3 tenets that he shared in that video. He talked about executive compensation being shifted to drive the behavior that they need to see, which is customer satisfaction. And so now a third of their executives' compensation, I don't know if that's their variable piece or their base as well, but a third of their compensation is defined by the company's net promoter score. And I can talk to him about customer obsession and even comp plans. Like, has he changed the way that he pays his salespeople? Now, what I quote sell to him has very little to do with sales compensation. I'm not an expert in comp plans, but I'm just trying to build a relationship with him to show them that I'm intelligent about the world that he lives in, beyond the specific set of services that I can sell him. So I just don't think enough sales professionals or even sales managers are willing to invest the amount of time that's required to do the necessary research to be able to have that business value driven conversation.
Yeah, Jill, wow, so many great insights there, especially the part about just putting in the time to do the research so that, we don't necessarily have to know detailed specifics of what they've talked about in that piece of data that we've uncovered, but just to be able to point out that we do understand it, that we can synthesize it and have a decent, intelligent conversation on it. I think that's the massive piece that's missing. Hey, folks, I want to be very cognizant of the time. We've got about 10 minutes left, so I'm going to jump to questions, and let's go kind of right through it. The first one I'm going to take on. The first question is, what do the panelists think about young people telling their friends and family to put down their smartphones and devices in October and actually talking face-to-face with people? Will the next generation reverse the millennials trend? So I'll actually take that one, guys, if that's okay with you. I actually don't know if that's necessary. I almost feel that, that question in itself implies that we're not doing anything productive. And I'm not arguing that, there are people that are not using the device correctly, but I don't think that's a fault of the device. I think that's the fault of the individual. So I actually think from a B2B perspective, we shouldn't put down these devices. In fact, I want my sales team to go all in on these devices. I want them living and breathing on LinkedIn and on Twitter and on Facebook, because the insights that they are going to uncover, to Jill Rowley's point, will help set them apart. So that's my take on it. Does any one of you want to kind of give your perspective on that thought?
I guess, Christian here. I guess it's a matter of finding the right balance, right? It's not just about communicating with millennials all of a sudden just through video and sending in mails and emails and never meet these people in person. I believe it's really about finding the right mix. Face to face is still important, and you can still have a very meaningful phone conversation with a customer, but it really depends on the situation when you have to use which kind of communication tool. I believe that's in the end, important to figure out.
Yeah, great point, Christian. Great point. I want to move on to a point here from Doug Clark that he made earlier. I promise I get to it. The question was really around longer sales cycles and what can we do? And I think all of you have addressed this, but Kevin, I'd love to get your further take on this comment from Doug, which is, isn't it okay to provide thought leadership throughout the sales cycle? The salesperson who is in front of the customer first, even sharing some of the secret sauce, will usually gain the loyalty early to eventually earn the business. Kevin, agree, disagree? If so, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, great point, Doug, and completely agree. And that's been a focus of ours, right? So I use the statistic of being 57% of the way through the buying decision prior to working with the sales team. So part of our efforts have been, how do we back up that conversation to earlier? And the way to do that is through insights, it's through educating the customer, it's through looking at different angles that maybe the customer did not traditionally look at. And in a product-centric organization where we have, industry-leading products, our products are well known, sometimes that's difficult because just of the way we've traditionally sold, which is leading with the product. So yes, that's spot on, Doug.
Yeah, that's thanks, Kevin, for adding that. Jill, I want to go to you. Joanna here makes a very, very nice comment, which is more of a perspective with a bit of a question in it, Jill. So I'll field this to you. She says, we're seeing more buyers taking a look at what other organizations are doing to influence what direction they should go. It's a lot easier for them to do that with the evolution of the internet and other mobile apps, smartphones, etc. And they're much more educated on their options as a result. So basically, in inbound or outbound situations, it makes prospecting so much more harder, Jill, because customers are so much more educated, right? And they're much more in a position to tune you out right away. So how do you get around this? How do you get around a customer in an age where information is freely available online? You've got tools like G2 Crowd, etc. You can really look at customers' reviews, recommendations, etc. How do you still be relevant today in the eye of the customer? How do you get attention, Jill?
Yeah, it's a great point and a really, really good question. So that is all true. And I say that your best salespeople are not on your payroll. They're your customer advocates. They're the most trustworthy and believable source of information. And so I think the role of the sales professional doesn't stop at getting signature on the contract. It needs to extend through earning that customer advocacy. And I know that there are, different functions and departments, customer service and support, and in a SaaS world, customer success that, quote, manage that relationship. But there needs to be, we're seeing a lot of organizations move to centers and pods, if you will, where marketing and sales and customer success all sit in the same building and not on different floors, so that there's this better understanding of the entire life cycle of that buyer and then customer. You get someone's attention by sharing what's interesting and relevant to them, which if they want to understand what other companies like them are doing, that's the kind of stuff you need to be able to share. Also one of the things I talk about is to be interesting. You must be interested in something other than yourself. And so from a content perspective, I've started to move from 1.0, which is sharing your company branded content, who cares, to sharing third-party thought leadership, buyer-centric and relevant content, to 3.0 is share that future customers content. That video that I referenced of the Unisys executive, I can share that on LinkedIn and tag him and give him kudos for changing the compensation model of their executive team to be better aligned to the business outcomes that they're trying to drive. I think that's going to get his attention better than a LinkedIn email. I'm sharing his message that he wants people to hear, and I'm sharing that and tagging him. That's going to get his attention. It's harder. It takes longer. This is time consuming. And the other point, and I know we're running out of time, is it is harder to open, almost as hard, if not harder to open than close. And I think we've made a big boo-boo in the sales industry by putting, 22, 23-year-old kids right out of college with very little knowledge, very little business experience, very little, not a very, good network, in the role of actually getting the buyer's attention. That's going to be really difficult when the buyer's looking for subject matter expertise, and how does some 22 or 23-year-old kid have and I have those as kids. I have 23 and 22-year-old boys. How do they do that? I think we need to reevaluate some of the decisions we've made in sales.
Yeah, Jill, so many great points there.
Yeah, sorry. That was, I don't want to end on a downer.
No, it's quite all right. I want to take one last question, and I'm going to turn to Anthony on this. I'm sorry. There's a question here from Anthony. It's for Christian. I apologize, Christian. Basically, the question is around relationship maps, and there's a lot of questions that have come in around relationship maps, which was a point that Kevin raised earlier, Christian. Essentially, the main kind of gist is this: if people are switching jobs every 2 to 3 years, Christian, how do we make changes in this relationship map, especially if you manage like 25, 30, 40 accounts? What do you do? Any ideas or tactics that you can leave the audience with?
I guess there are different ways to do it. You can do it in a pretty automated way, and that would then come down to using social selling techniques. So you can easily follow, for example, someone through LinkedIn Sales Nav. You can follow a customer or a particular individual, and you know exactly when he or she changes jobs and moves on, and then you can again engage with customers. So that's something you can definitely automate, and I can only encourage everyone who utilizes social selling techniques, just do it, because this is very powerful. Just imagine you sold a solution to someone at company A, and you dealt with a particular person, decision maker, head of IT, whatsoever, and you build a relationship, and this person is very, very happy with you, right? And this person at some point moves on to another company, maybe in 3 years. This would be absolutely an opportunity for you to engage. So this is something you can certainly automate, and it can be very successful. But another way is, of course, just building your network, and that also comes back to what Jill just said. You need to have salespeople in your team also, who are not only SMEs, but also who have these large networks, so experienced guys. This is something a 20 years old guy or girl cannot have, right? This is impossible. So this is something that comes, of course, over the years. And yeah, I guess these are the two major points, like really automate it, but also do it in a manual way.
Great points. Hey, gang, that brings us to the end of the show today. I appreciate everyone sticking around until the end. Hope this has been a great session for you. I've certainly learned a lot of great gems. I've taken lots of detailed notes. I want to remind everyone that the recording of this session will be made available in about a day or so, so look out in your email for that. Again, thanks for joining, and my sincere thanks to our panelists today, Jill Rowley, Kevin Casey, and Christian Obando. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful and positive day, and we'll see you on the other side. Take care.
Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.